Tonight, we're going to be continuing our Savage Jesus series, and we're going to be talking about a verse in the book of Mark. This whole idea is going to be called Trapped in Nazareth. Now, we've talked about Nazareth. If you remember back in week 1 of this series, I mean, as I said, we're 6 weeks into this, which is pretty crazy. We've gone 6 weeks of this message, but we talked about Nazareth. Nazareth is a place where Jesus grew up. Jesus grew up in Nazareth, and I compared it to Council Bluffs. Kind of a place where you don't really expect a whole lot of good to come out of it. You think people who are from Council Bluffs, they stay in Council Bluffs, and they never leave Council Bluffs. And so that's the type of place that Nazareth was. Not a whole lot of good or anything came out of Nazareth. And so we're going to be reading in Mark chapter 6. We're going to be starting in verse 1. And it's just a short little piece here about Jesus going home. So it says, Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue. The synagogue is pretty much just a Jewish church. We still call them synagogues today. It's the same type of thing. When taught in the synagogues, and many people who heard him were amazed. Where did this man get these things? They asked. This wisdom that has been given to him. What are these remarkable miracles he's been performing? They're all amazed. And they thought, isn't this the carpenter? Isn't that Mary's son? And the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters with us now? And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his home. He could not, and that really makes some people mad by saying he could not, because we expect that he would not, but it actually says Jesus could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed by their lack of faith. So we walk into this time where we're in chapter 6. So Jesus has been walking around doing miracles, doing all this cool stuff for a while. This is the furthest that we've gone in any of the chapters of our series yet. So all the stuff that we've talked about for the last 5 weeks, he's already done. He's gone and he's healed lepers. He's gone and cast demons out of people. He's done all these incredible things. And all of a sudden, Jesus is like, you know what? It's time for me to go home. And Jesus is super intentional about it. So we're going to be talking about intentionality for a second. Jesus was really intentional about going home. Now you're thinking, why would Jesus want to go home? Like, what's the purpose of him going home? And how do we know he's actually intentional about it? Why? I mean, I know plenty of people who go home after starting a job for a while because they just want to go home. They want to go and visit. But Jesus brought his disciples with him. Now, he didn't bring his disciples everywhere, but he brought his disciples places where they needed to be so that they could learn something. So he says, hey guys, we're doing all this cool stuff, We're going to take a 20-mile journey from Capernaum, which we talked about last week, from Capernaum to Nazareth. We're going to walk 20 miles. We're going to go there. We're going to go say hello to, where I came from. And his disciples probably would have been pretty excited. Like, I think if you become friends with somebody and you really like them and they're pretty chill, and if they're not from where you're from, it's kind of cool to go see where they grew up. Go see how things are different, you maybe go to the Sonic that they grew up going to or something like that. There's just something cool about going to the place where other people grew up. Or if you're in a relationship with somebody and while, you guys are in high school, so you're probably dating somebody who lives within, maybe 10 miles of you. But when you make it to college, if you go off to college, there's a good chance you'll start, seeing somebody, dating somebody who lives in somewhere completely different than you, completely different side of the country or something like that. And it's really cool just to go home and see where that person grew up, because the South is way different than Nebraska. The West Coast is way different than Nebraska. It's kind of cool to go and learn about where somebody grew up, because you kind of see why they are the person who they are now. So these disciples would have been really, really kind of psyched to go and see where Jesus grew up. But why was Jesus going back home? He had no reason to. We've talked about all these cool miracles that he's done, all this awesome stuff. He was really successful where he was. I think half the time when we go home, the reason why we go home is because we have failed at something. And it's like, I need to go live in my parents' basement for about 6 months while I try to get a little bit more money. That way I can go live out somewhere again. You will see this again a lot as you get older. you'll have friends that are like, oh, yep, I'm living back at my parents' house. And you're like, why are they living there again? It's because they don't have any money left. And so you see this a lot even today. But Jesus wasn't going back because he didn't have any money. He didn't fail at anything. He'd been healing people. He had been doing really great stuff. He had been giving really great messages, traveling around the world, just telling people about his Father. It's so cool. And all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to go home. And he had a reason behind it. We're going to get to that reason in a little bit, but we're gonna get that at the end. But we're also going to talk a little bit about consistency. Now, consistency is a strength, and it's a strength that I personally do not have. If you've ever heard of Gallup Strength Finders, it's something that it's a test you can take, and it tells you what you're strong in. They have 34 different strengths. They tell you what your top 5 are, and if you pay for it, you can see what your top 5 are, and then how it goes down from there. And there's 34 of them. Number 31 out of my 34 is consistency. Consistency just means you're pretty even keel. You're always going to show up at the same time. You really like being super consistent about stuff. And I am not that at all. I am not a consistent person. I'm like, hey, let's just see how this goes. Let's just see what happens. And Jesus was actually extremely consistent. As you would know if you've been with us throughout this series, Jesus was a really good teacher. He spoke all the time, and people really liked what he said. I don't think that's the first time that I've said they were amazed by his teaching. I think that's probably about the 3rd time I've said that in the 6 weeks that we've done this. People were amazed by the words he said. And in the same way, people got mad about the words that he said. Because these people got mad at him too, so did everybody else. People got mad because he came to challenge what they initially think and what they think Jesus should have been. He challenges their point of view. Jesus was very consistent. Now, if you are consistent, the issue with consistency and what people who are very consistent feel is they don't feel like they get a whole lot of recognition. So if, say your teacher says, thank you for getting that in on time, or your boss at work says, thank you for doing that on time. That's not a compliment. That means, hey, you never get stuff in on time. Thank you for actually doing it on time for once. And I was definitely that way as a student. My teacher would thank me for doing something on time because I always turn stuff in really late. And I still do now. But if they're telling you, thank you for doing that on time, it ain't a compliment. And something I've experienced just in my life was you start giving messages like I do every single week. You know, you get off stage and somebody goes, oh, that was really good. I really like that. Oh, that was so good. And like every week, somebody's saying, oh, that was so cool. It's so cool to see, how you've grown up and everything. And then after a little while, people stopped saying that stuff. And you start thinking, am I doing worse? Like, what? Like, I don't feel good about myself. Like, no one's pouring into my bucket. Like, what is this? And then really, no response is a better compliment than probably a response. Because if you set a bar and then you start meeting that bar because you set a good bar, then people are just going to stop saying, hey, that was so good. If every once in a while someone's come up to you and say, oh, that was so good, it probably means your message wasn't quite as good last week. I'm really glad you gave a good one this week. So, but it can be hard to be consistent in something because you feel like you don't get the same recognition that you may have gotten in the past. So it's consistency, and Jesus was very consistent. And we'll talk about familiarity. These people, the people of Nazareth, were very familiar with Jesus. Now, Jesus, as I said, grew up there. He spent about 30 years in Nazareth. Now, I know that many people think, well, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, right? You know, oh, little town of Bethlehem. You know, we sing that song. It's like, Christmas song. It's like, he's always going to Bethlehem. Isn't Jesus from Bethlehem? No, Jesus was just born in Bethlehem, and then they went back to Nazareth, and Jesus actually grew up in Nazareth. And so in Nazareth, people saw this guy grow up, and it says, isn't that just a carpenter? Right? Because that's what Jesus was to them in Nazareth. He was a carpenter. He was a guy who knew a trade. And if they wanted something made out of wood, maybe they went to him. But he might have been like the 3rd best carpenter there. Like, that guy's a carpenter. And they really insult him. They say, isn't that Mary's son? And in Jewish culture, so the culture that they would have had, you don't say, is that Mary's son? You don't say, is that his mom's son? It's always his father. Out of respect, a man, you would say, isn't that Joseph's son? But if you know the Bible at all, you know the birth of Jesus, it says that the virgin gave birth. And I don't know about you, but if someone told me, like if I had a student come up to me right now and say, hey, I'm pregnant, but I didn't have sex, I'm going to look at you, I'm going to say, BS. And I can probably guess who you had sex with and who's probably the dad in here right now. But you know what? But so these people did not believe Mary. In the birth of Jesus, an angel appeared to Mary and Joseph and said, hey, she's a virgin. Like she didn't have sex. But the angel didn't appear to everybody else. And they're like, she was hanging out with Tom a lot back then. Like, that it could have been Tom's kid, not actually Joseph's kid, and she just convinced Joseph as her son. Also, at this point, Joseph had passed away. Jesus' dad was no longer living. And so they didn't know who his dad was. And so like, okay, you know the word that they're pretty much using here. This guy is his mom's son. And they're like, yeah, and we know his brothers live here still. James, Judas, Joseph, and Simon, they still live here. And some of us are married to his sisters, and they're actually listening to him teach right now. They knew Jesus so well. And they're like, there's no way that this guy is who he says he is, because he came from Nazareth, and we've seen him grow up. And the crazy thing was, Jesus' family, other than his sisters who might have been here in the room based on the text, might have been there in the room only because their husbands would have been there, Jesus' family thought he was crazy. They literally thought, like, even Mary, his mother, who had an angel appear to him and say, hey, this is the Son of God, thought Jesus was crazy. At one point, they showed up, some of his family showed up and said, hey, come home, quit doing your thing. Quit going out and like, dude, I don't think you know who you are. And they didn't believe that Jesus was who he said he was. They're not even in the synagogue the day that he's teaching. If I were to live somewhere else and I came home to teach at Relevant, I would really hope my parents came and showed up, because I'm not there for long. His family didn't show up because they thought he was crazy, because they knew him. Because they were so familiar with Jesus, they thought there's no way that this guy is who he says he is. But what about Nazareth? I called this Trapped in Nazareth. What does Nazareth have to do with any of this? Because I don't want you to leave here thinking like, oh, well, Jesus left Nazareth, so I need to leave my Nazareth. So maybe I need to leave Elkhorn because I'm trapped here and I need to get out of Elkhorn and I just need to go. That's not what Nazareth is. I'm not telling you need to go to your job and be like, oh, I need to go quit my job because that's my Nazareth and I'm trapped in my job. I'm not telling you to go quit your job. I'm not saying go and break up with so-and-so because they're your Nazareth. Your Nazareth is not a person or a thing. Your Nazareth is a perspective. These people had a preconceived idea of who Jesus was based on his past. They knew how he grew up. They thinking, that guy came from a woman and probably another dude who wasn't actually his dad. He was just a carpenter, and he came from right down the street. There is no way that is the Son of God, because they became all too familiar with Jesus, and it gets to the point where he is trapped by their perspective. So I want to ask you, what perspective does somebody have on you that keeps you trapped? What is your Nazareth? Because Nazareth can be just about anybody in the way that they think of you. Jesus ultimately here gets rejected. Now I know when we think about the word rejected, we're thinking about I'm asking a girl out and she says no and I got rejected. But rejected can go in so many different ways, to where Jesus shows up to this place, he's given a word, a great word, people think it's amazing, and they reject him because of the person that he is, because of the person that he has been in his life, because of the person that they saw growing up. They're like, there's no way that guy is the Son of God. So we're going to reject him. And it says, because of their unbelief, because of their lack of faith, Jesus couldn't do anything. Now, I think we've all heard the Bible verse, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Philippians 4:13, and we can win every single football game because Jesus is on our side, and we can go and do all this great stuff because Jesus is on our side. That's not what that text actually means. But this is the same thing, where because of his unbelief, he couldn't actually do anything because they didn't believe in who he was. They didn't believe in who he claimed to be. And they rejected him. So back to the idea of intentionality. Jesus brought his disciples, and now I've used this term a couple of times, Jesus is Jesus, where Jesus knew what was going to happen when we went back to Nazareth. He didn't have to go back. He knew they're probably not going to believe who I am. They're not going to see the transformation I've had in my life. They're not going to believe anything I say. I could just go back, have the embarrassment myself, and then show back up in like 2 days, and it'll be fine. I don't got to bring my buddies with me. And he ends up deciding, you know what? They need to come with me. And there's got to be a reason behind it. Why would he bring his group of guys with him to go and get rejected by the people that cared about him the very most, or who should care about him the very most? And the answer actually comes after what we've read. Again, if you remember last week, we talked about how after all these letters, or after the Bible, what we now have gathered as the Bible was written, we added chapters and verses into this. So the whole Mark chapter 6 was not there when Mark originally wrote this. Now, when we added it, there's some human error occasionally throughout the way it's broken up, to where this one should have continued. Because if you see on my Bible right here, I got these bold headers. Right after it says a prophet without honor, which is what we just read, it says Jesus sends out the 12. And so after Jesus was amazed by their lack of faith, it says, then Jesus went around teaching from village to village, calling the 12 to him, and he began to send them 2 by 2 and gave them the authority over impure spirits. So Jesus was setting something up. He was getting ready to send his disciples. He's like, you know what? So far, what have I done for my disciples? I've taught them what it's like to give a good message. We talked about that. We said multiple times he's given a message and people have been like, oh, that's so good. I love it. I love it. I love it. So they know how to talk to people. He has taught them how to heal people. And it says Jesus gives them that kind of anointing. It says that later in the text. It says he gives them that anointing to be able to heal people. It also says that he gave them dominion over impure spirits. So he cast out demons earlier. He showed them how to do that. He showed them how to do all these really cool things. But there's one thing that they had to learn in order to go and tell people about Jesus. And they had to learn how to get rejected. Rejection is something we are so afraid of. And when I say this, I'm speaking to myself. I am terrified of rejection. I hold things in from saying, I hold questions in from asking people all the time because I'm afraid of what their response might be, because I don't want a negative response, and I don't want any type of confrontation with anybody, because that's just not who I am. I am terrified of rejection. So Jesus is like, you know what? I'm going to show them what pretty much the ultimate rejection could look like. I'm going to go and get rejected by my own family. I'm going to go get rejected by the people who should love and care about me most and be most excited about what I'm doing in my life. I'm going to get rejected by them, so that way I can show them just how to shake it off. So Jesus goes, brings his disciples, and they pretty much just run him out of town, and he gets rejected. And now Jesus has to go to other towns and gets ready to send his disciples one by one. And actually, through this rejection, and we get so worried about rejection that we end up missing God's direction for us in our lives. We get so worked up about what they might say, what they might do. We get so worried about what the outcome might be if they reject me, that we don't even end up following the direction that God has on our lives. And we miss an opportunity. We miss the direction. So Jesus sends out his 12 disciples, and they go out and they bring more people to Jesus. They put their faith in Jesus. Because they now know how to get rejected, it ends up saying, bring nothing with you. Jesus tells them, bring nothing with you except for a staff. Wear sandals and wear a shirt. Don't even bring an extra shirt. Go to villages, show up, stay in the same house until you're ready to leave. And if they're not wanting to listen to you, it says, dust off your boots and move on. And so they have to learn how to get rejected. Now for us as Christ followers, we have to get used to getting rejected. It is really common to get rejected. You could be inviting somebody to come to YU, be like, hey, I got this thing. We talk about Jesus. It's a lot of fun. It's just a good time. I like going every week. Would you want to come with me? People are going to tell you no. And I was there in high school. I invited people to Youth United. I said, hey, why don't you show up? And I had people tell me no. And it is like the most awkward thing that ever happened. Because like, okay, where does the conversation go from here? Because I don't know what to say next because you just said no. And I'm like, okay. And I just walk away. Like, it's just super awkward. And it gets to the point where you get rejected enough and you feel like, you know what? I'm not even going to ask the question anymore. I'm going to be satisfied with what we look like. I'm going to be satisfied with with the amount of people that are showing up. I'm going to be satisfied with what my small group looks like. I like the people that are in it anyways. Why would I add more people in it? And I don't want to go through the awkward situation of getting rejected by somebody, so I'm just not even going to say anything. And really, God is directing us to one way, and by being afraid of this rejection, we're going a completely different way. Jesus gave us an example of what it looks like to be rejected by your own family. There were people that he was trying to get, that he was trying to get on his side, and they ended up not. And how many of you guys have ever tried to get validation or tried to get people who you care about most, your family? It could be a dad, it could be a mom, it could be a sibling, it could be just a really good friend, just to be on your side with something and get completely rejected by them. Anybody ever been completely rejected by somebody before, and it's just like, it completely breaks you. You're like, I want to impress this person so bad, yet anything I do, they're never going to give me their validation. They're never going to give me what I need. And we talked about this during week 2. We talked about there's only one place where you're going to get validation that's actually going to fulfill you in your life. There's only one place that if you put your validation there, you put your validation in God, it's the only place that you're actually going to get full validation from. Because if you put your validation into somebody else, to a relationship with somebody, they're going to let you down 100% of the time. Because they're going to let themselves down. If they're going to let themselves down, how are they going to not let you down? And so Jesus uses this opportunity to remind them about the validation that comes from God. You don't need the validation of everybody else. Go out there and try it. Go out there and invite them. Go out there and get them to show up. And if they reject you, just dust it off. I just channel your inner Taylor Swift and shake it off. You don't need that. They say no, okay. I bet you somebody else is going to say yes. We can't be afraid of rejection because we're going to end up missing out on God's direction. So today, where are you getting rejected? Jesus went to Nazareth, that way he could get rejected and show us what it was like in order to get rejected so we could be used to it. So we could know that, you know what? Jesus did it, and it turned out okay for him. The disciples went and did it after this. I guarantee you they got rejected, and it turned out all right for them. They figured it out. And it says, dust it off, shake it off. Don't be afraid. Just go and do it.